That's on their land that we live, work, and play each day. In front of you, you have an agenda for May the 16th council meeting. Councilor Mutri, you have an addition?
Yeah, just under old business, I'd like to add National Indigenous Persons Day.
I'm going to.
We haven't made two.
You gotta be kidding.
Oh, well, that guy's.
Anything else? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. You have the minutes of the April 25th council meeting. Can I have a motion to adopt?
So move. All right.
Business? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Rio Tinto. Andrew, David.
Good
you for coming.
evening. Good evening. Just confirming you can hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear us?
Excellent. Excellent. I can. It's a little patchy, but it looks like it's just cleared up. So I think we're good to go. So look, first up, just really appreciate the time. I know it's been a long time since I've presented to one of these meetings, but we've been moving into the space of the community leaders updates. Today, I'm speaking to you on behalf of Michelle Chiron, the interim general manager here in BC. As I think most of you are well aware, we're undergoing sort of a time of transition and moving towards restarting the smelter, so a slightly different focus at the moment. Just before I go on as well, I would like to acknowledge that I'm here in Kitimat today on the traditional territory of the Haisla First Nation, and as well acknowledge the operating footprint that we work in every single day, spanning across the watershed area through the Cheslada territory, Sykas, Stalatin, Noddly, Skintyee, Wet'suwet'en First Nation, as well as Office of the Wet'suwet'en and the Nitai-Bun as well. And then, as I'm sure you're all aware of the impacts across a whole range of First Nations in the region. So I think worth pointing out as well. Just as we move in, I think you've got the slide deck in front of you. Do you need that to be shared, or can you all follow as we go?
What's the best?
We should have it shared for the public.
Okay, yeah, it would be good if it was shared, I guess, for the public.
Perfect. I'll go to full screen mode. And then if I share my screen, there we go. Okay. And that should have worked.
It did.
Excellent. Excellent. After a couple of years of video conferencing, we're finally getting the hang of it. Okay, so look, the first slide I'd like to touch on, slide number 2. Really pleased to announce to the community and the community partners that we have over in the watershed that I've announced Quinton Beach will be joining our team full-time, based in Burns Lake, but will also be working across into the Vanderhoof region and as well working closely with the Nechako First Nations, with Cheslada, and as well supporting our operations in the watershed area. So, spillway contract, work with Emergency Management BC on dam safety, the work with Avison on snow surveys and snowpack monitoring, and as well some of the baseline environmental monitoring, any groundworks, preliminary geotech works as we progress the studies at the water release facility, and the rehabilitation across that region. So a lot of work going on in that area, and that's why we've named Quinton as a senior resource. I'm sure some of you may have been familiar with Quinton, as he's been on the Burns Lake Village Council before. Family dates back to the area to 1911. And interestingly, Quinton's grandmother was actually on one of the ranches that was inundated by the reservoir and the power development in that area. So, very close connections and close ties to the region. And yeah, formally he'll start on the 13th of June, but he'll start to join a number of the files transitioning into that role in the near future. Okay, I'll head to the next slide. So Kamano T2 project, it's been a long road. I remember vividly sitting here talking to you all at the start of the Kamano project, T2 project, and talking about what the impacts were and how we were going to execute it in the tunnel boring machine. Well, I'm very pleased to say that we are on the threshold of completion of that project. Literally, we are days and a couple of weeks away from watering up the tunnel and introducing water to the T2 tunnel for the first time. The teams are finalizing construction completion now. They're doing what we term a dental clean by pressure washing and sweeping the whole 16 kilometers of the new tunnel, and then all of the associated infrastructure and tie-in connection points. So you can see the 2600 level plug there on the slide. That's the door that closes, and effectively the water will be on the other side of that plug. And then the bifurcation, again, just gives a sense of the complexity of the civil work and the concrete work to make that one tunnel split to join the two penstocks into the Kamano powerhouse. And ultimately, all of that a risk mitigation project for the aging T1 tunnel. We actually hosted last week Ted White and Doris Leong from the Office of the Water Comptroller. Went up into site, had a look through, and we're working on the final authorizations from the office that was formerly Flynn Road. Not sure what they are now, and then also working through DFO on final permitting there. And lastly, demobilization and rehabilitation of the site. We've demobilized the camp that was in Heretsky in the middle. The contractors are pulling out. We've got the scrap steel guys there cutting up the old TBM and cutting up the rails and all that equipment, demobilizing and remediating the site that was done. So T2, well and truly on its way. Over the summer, we will be doing the commissioning work. We'll be proving its performance, its hydraulic efficiency. We've got a couple of tests to do around load rejection and testing its efficiency. So still a lot of work to do before we put the final stamp on it, but we're well and truly approaching a major milestone in the next 2 weeks. Okay. Another significant infrastructure project for us in Kitimat. So with the development of the LNG site, and you can see in this photo in the background, actually, the cranes that are in the background there, that's and that sort of dome, that's the LNG site, LNG Canada, as it pertains to our site. Part of that has been for them to occupy our original terminal and metal loading terminal. And in order for them to occupy that, they've had to construct a new wharf and port facility for us here in Kitimat. So again, very pleased to say, as we sit here today, that is now complete and been turned over to the operation. We've bought our first ship, and this photo is actually the first ship we bought alongside. And we're turning that into an operational part of the facility now. Effectively, another long-term commitment, significant infrastructure development here in BC. That terminal is nearly $300 million worth there, and will provide, ongoing capacity for exports, capacity for rail handling and rail interconnection to the West Coast. So something we're very pleased to receive, and something that should support the future of the North and continuing the North's economic benefit for years to come. Okay. So current focus areas for us, a lot happening at the smelter, a lot happening in the operation, as I'm sure a number of you are aware, and as we've gone through and given the restart updates following the strike. Again, certainly no shortage of work to keep us busy. So going through that cultural transformation, anytime business goes through a trauma, and I use that word wisely or carefully, like a strike, there's a lot of work to do to return the site back to an operation, a lot of work to do to continue reflecting on the culture that was and where do we want to be. So again, pleased to say that that's working, but with any culture transformation and culture change, it's an enormous amount of work and requiring a significant shift from the workers in the smelter. Investments in our assets, so a huge amount of work going on. Obviously, T2 and the wharf and port we've touched on, but as well, we're going through and really setting about securing our assets for the long term. So after the modernization, ensuring that we have the assets in the right condition, the right shape, modernizing those assets that are legacy, the original from the 1950s, and basically providing for that long-term economic certainty of the province, providing for the capacity of low CO2 aluminum, and as well providing for the future of the operation here in BC. So that's been quite a key and strategic focus as well, and especially in the current context where we've seen the sanctions on Russia and specifically for us, Russian aluminum, and as well as we've seen the increase in demand for North American manufacture and raw materials production in vehicles, aeronautical, military applications. We've certainly seen a surge in interest in the products that we create here in BC. As well, we're seeing a surge in interest in low CO2 products. So as Tesla are looking to progress, as a number of other high-end customers, socially responsible customers are looking to progress their interests and their positioning around low CO2, as they look to their supply chain, they're coming to us. And as the producers of some of the lowest CO2 aluminum on the planet, that's certainly creating a lot of buzz and a lot of interest in the region. We've got a lot of work going on around our restart preparation. We're literally on the threshold of starting to return the production to full capacity. So following the labor dispute last year, we reduced to 25% production through the smelter. We've been holding that level across the winter, and actually quite literally this time tomorrow, we will be in the business of restarting pots. So tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, we'll start again. And over the next 8 months as we approach to Christmas, we'll be going on a linear ramp up. So basically, we won't be back to full production until Christmas this year. We've got a number of significant repairs underway. So working through conveyor repairs, working through our asset management and maintenance, both there and in Kamano. So a huge focus. Working on logistics management, it's an incredibly tough time moving commodities around North America and globally, both receiving raw materials, receiving parts and equipment required to operate the smelter, as well as shipping final products to their home locations. So logistics is an enormous business for us at the moment and an enormous amount of effort to manage, given those global supply chain difficulties that we see. And a business such as ours that is, so inherently global is impacted. So working on that very hard. Training and recruitment, we've recruited over 150 people in the last months. We've got another, I think, 80 on vacancies that we're looking to fill and recruit. So, a significant number of people joining the operations, joining professional roles, staff roles, training roles, you name a role, we have them: operators, maintainers, millwrights, electricians. We are recruiting, and it's an enormous focus. Some of that is due to resetting the smelter and resetting the size of the organization and the level of people we need to operate following the lean years that we've been through. And the other side of that is around providing for retirements and some of the heavy retirement curves that we've seen as the average age of our workforce continues to creep up. Working on our First Nations and community partnerships. Obviously, I think most of you are well aware of the work we do in the watershed with the Cheslada, working with the Nechako First Nations on the opportunities to improve there, as well as conversations around agreements and settlements as we move forward. So working as well with the Heisler on the Oolakan fishery, and as well as increasing employment and economic development across the watershed. And I'll touch on that a little bit more as well. And then the watershed infrastructure study. So we have the water release facility at Kenny Dam, progressing the order of magnitude study on that. We're working with the NE2 table as well, and working on the rehabilitation of the Murray Cheslada and understanding what that would look like and how we progress that in the coming months and ultimately years. So a lot to keep us busy, a lot to focus on, but some quite exciting long-term and strategic developments. It's not all about the day-to-day. So looking at the restart, basically we had our first pilot process restart and trial our methodology back in February. We're going through the process of restarting over 9 months. We have 91 pots operating. We will be restarting the remainder of 292 pots over the next 8 months. And we are working on 3 different restart methodologies depending on the conditions of the pots when they were shut down. As you can imagine, molten aluminum, once it solidifies and cools down, is very difficult to manage, very difficult to handle. So some of that we're literally having to put airbags underneath the aluminum slabs, and they're roughly 0.5 meter thick, 8 meters wide, 4 meters wide by 8 meters long. They weigh 25 to 30 tons. So having to pop those out, having to cut those into pieces, handle them, maneuver them, get them out, it's an enormous undertaking. And that's the work that we've been working on the last 6 months following the return to work of the workforce. So an enormous effort, huge amount of work by the teams, huge amount of work by contractors. I think we have over 450 contractors working on site, on top of the 250 contractors in Kamano working on T2. So, we're running close to 1,000 contractors as well as the workforce that we have at the moment. So huge amount of work. Hey. So shifting gears just a little bit, and I know a number of you have seen this at the last Community Leaders Forum, but I thought it worthwhile just reflecting on the inflow forecast, given we are sort of at the start of the spring freshet, and it is a little bit of a later freshet, but we are standing on that precipice of the freshet. So just thought I'd give a little bit of a look at what we've been working on for the spring. As we sit here today, the snowpack and the projected inflows for the year are projected to be right around long-term average, 99% of long-term average. As the weeks go by, that's sort of fluctuating between 95 and up to 105% of long-term average. And so what we then do is plot the distribution of how much water we can expect to get. And, we have those extreme years in yellow. So the maximum that we can reasonably expect using the 65 years of history to guide is this chart here on the right, all the way through to the minimum. And then we have a series of ranked probabilities that come alongside of it. So the most likely scenario is an inflow forecast right around long-term average, somewhere in here. So that's what we're seeing as we sit here today. Over the last week, we've actually accumulated more snow, and I know some of you woke up to snow late last week. But again, it's continued to be slightly cooler than average for this time of year, and seeing accumulations of snow in some parts of the alpine areas. So this is the real interesting part, I guess, for those who watch the river and those who are interested in hydrology. We've been doing a lot of work this year to plan the 2022 release, and we've been working with the Water Engagement Initiative Technical Committee. We've been working with the Cheslada, working with the Nechako First Nations to look at, could we challenge the status quo and release water in a way that provides for increased health benefits for the Nechako River. So we looked firstly at the volume of water that needs to be spilled over and above the annual water allocation. So the green box here, that's the annual water allocation, and effectively that's the minimum water releases as prescribed in the water license, in the 97 agreement, etc. The blue box here, which looks like a bit of a mountain range, that's the average volume of water from the model that says we would need to be released during the period of time between May and the STMP period. So effectively what we looked at is how that water shape would need to be released. We plotted the status quo. So what would have we normally done in years past, and how would that water have normally been managed? And that's this checkered black line here. So normally what would happen is, in the interest of flood risk, we would release the water early and to provide that maximum flexibility in the reservoir. Working with the biologists and working with those who have the keenest interest and understanding of the biological processes in the Nechako River, there's that understanding that one of the things we could do to improve is to replicate a spring freshet and mirror the natural inflows to the reservoir, and in effect providing a miniature freshet in the Nechako, the upper Nechako, and then down into the lower Nechako regions. So we work to define a spill regime that follows this black curve here, this solid black. So we'll set to mirror a spring freshet, we'll come up, we'll have the trailing edge handle the variability before we move into that summer temperature management plan period. And I just wanted to reflect that STMP, this block here, is the average, not necessarily a forecast. What this provides for is increased habitat, and I'll show you a couple of photos on that. It provides for, I think it's 86 days above 100 CMS in the upper Nechako region. So when you go from this period in the freshet all the way through to the end of STMP, and it provides for a very different shape than years gone by. So again, in recognition that there is, biological cycles and processes happening in that river, both around sturgeon and salmon. So trying to reflect that in the spill release program. It is looking to correspond with seasonal triggers that mimic as much as possible the natural conditions. So as we've seen, it's been a later freshet. We've held release in order to mimic the natural inflows to the reservoir, and we've done that in conjunction with the environmental monitors and the teams on the ground there. We started releasing and increasing release last week. We went up to 72 on Thursday last week and up to 100, I think, tomorrow or today. So continuing to do that. I do want to stress that we've done all of this in full understanding and appreciation to the downstream flood risk, both for the Murray-Cheslata system and the Nechako system, and that all of this has been achieved without any increase in the flood risk, and whilst keeping the spill volumes commensurate so that we don't see any elevations in those there. What does that look like visually? These are a couple of snapshots in the river that we took last year, and we use as sort of a bit of a visual reference for what the flows would be like. And when we overlay the natural inflows with the spillway releases this year, these are a couple of photos from the Nechako River that we expect to see. And interestingly, you can see in these photos on the right that this has that canary reed grass that is sort of infesting the upper reaches of the Nechako River submerged, which creates its other challenges, but in the end, it does provide more access to habitat, etc. But realizing that this canary reed grass infestation is still a significant issue that needs to be considered moving forward in the interest of health of the river. And then lastly, again, I've covered a lot of that, but this is the model output that most of you are used to seeing, that we plot now that hydrograph from Skins Lake Spillway. We have the ranked probabilities of exceedance, so we may need to spill a little bit more. So, if we have a look at the purple line there, it could even be a little bit more than what we are forecasting in that blue line. And ultimately, though, nothing that would exceed the flood caps in Vanderhoof, and only one sequence that we concede that would need to be managed in the Murray-Cheslada system. So very low likelihoods, and at the end of the day, considerably more than would be typical at this time of year. So what that looks like at Vanderhoof, this is probably the most important chart for this group, this audience. What we're expecting to see is sometime right around the first week of June, the peak of the inflows to the Nechaco River. So that includes the Notley River, that includes the flows from Skins Lake Spillway and all the lower lying watersheds. And we see that right around the 300 to 325 mark at the moment, and somewhere probably within that shaded blue. Again, the most we could expect is some of these red curves up here in the highest years. Again, even with a 2007 inflow, we don't see any exceedance in Vanderhoof. I do always want to caveat that, though, that these are the predictions based on the events that have happened previously. You know, there's always that uncertainty around unprecedented weather events and the impacts that could be driven accordingly. But as you can see, the majority of the scenarios are well down, sort of below anything close to that flood cap. Then we roll into the STMP period and then trail off into September. Okay, lastly, a couple of last slides. So a plug for the Get Involved Nechaco website, continuing to evolve and grow that. All of the meeting minutes, all of the documents, data, information that's been produced for the Water Engagement Initiative, as well as a lot of the historical documents that we've been able to put our hands on. We're assembling into that website. We have the interactive maps around interests. And as we move into the flow modeling and scenarios, the trade-off analysis, you'll see the direct outputs from that in here as well. So that's a nice little segue to the Water Engagement Initiative. We're continuing to advance. You know, we are proceeding with our next teleconference or video conference meeting on May 25th. A little interjection, I am desperate to get face-to-face meetings back after the summer. So really keen to create that connection again and create some of those social processes that I think we've been lacking in a video conference world. You know, there are upsides around less travel and you know, less time around, you know, people moving, but there is certainly something lost. So I think moving forward, we can look to a hybrid model of, you know, video conferences and in-person meetings. We are moving forward to progressing with the structured decision-making process. So understanding various bookend scenarios, understanding various bookend flow hydrographs, and understanding how the performance metrics perform against those. And the total output of that is intended to guide the thinking on the holistic impact to health of the river, as well as the cultural uses, recreational uses, etc. So we'll be testing various hydrographs in that process. You know, we'll be testing various things that we have there. We'll even use the 2022 actuals as a test case and continue working with the community groups, the First Nations, and the other participants at WEI on that. Looking forward to, over the coming months, starting to hone in on what opportunities we have to improve the health of the river and what can be implemented accordingly. Okay, regional economic development, a lot of work happening in and around the watershed, around investment and partnership works. Cheslada have been going from strength to strength at both the spillway, but as well at T2. I think they've had up to 95 people employed at the T2 project, as you know, community members as well as non-Indigenous employees that have been working for them. So that's been a huge success story. We're looking to integrate the Cheslada workforce into the operation in Kamano moving forward, and have identified a number of scopes there. The advantage there is that a lot of them are watershed residents from either Burns Lake, the south side area, but as well, I believe there are people coming from Vanderhoof, from Prince George, and all the way across back through. We have the Wet'suwet'en First Nation. We're collaborating on economic opportunities there. That's still in its early days and infancy, but something we're working on. Working with the Sturgeon Hatchery, working on a renewed funding agreement for the next 10 years. So that's been something we've been working with the Freshwater Fisheries Society, as well as the BC government to make sure that that isn't interrupted and in actual fact, challenging them to grow what they're looking to achieve and how they involve the community in that. The Heisler Fisheries, we've got activity in Kamano with their fisheries branch and their fisheries entity. Huge amount of work this year on the Oolakan fishery. And interestingly, the Oolakan fishery this year is the second strongest we have on record since the 1970s. So a huge catch this year. The Heisler harvested 40 tons of Oolakan. And for the first time in my history, they actually stopped fishing because they had enough. They were done. So it wasn't an imposition from the fishery specialist, and something that was fantastic to see the communities buzzing on that front. Working with the Nechako First Nations, obviously on the 2022 actual flows and monitoring the impacts from 2022. So we've got crews on the river doing that and being a part of that. Working as well with Avison on the snow surveys, snowpack monitoring, the ice jam surveys, and a whole lot of other baseline stuff supporting NHC on the ground. And then DWB, a new consultant out of Burns Lake, supporting the work on the Murray Cheslada and some of the baseline environmental monitoring that we're looking to assemble as well. So huge amount of activity in the watershed region this year and this summer in particular. And continuing to build on the work that we've been doing in the last few years. Community investments, significant work in Breakfast Clubs of Canada, Water Lily Trails, UMBC, and I won't touch all of those, but I see, Spruce City Wildlife there, something we're very proud of with the hatchery, as well as continued support with the Vanderhoof Chamber of Commerce, moving in and sharing the space there. And the Chaco White Sturgeon Recovery Initiative, again, critically important to the work that we do. So that's it. I've covered a lot of ground. I've spoken a lot. I'm going to pause for a drink of water, but any questions, comments, or queries on anything that we've seen there today?
Any questions? Go ahead, Councillor Butcher.
Okay, on the photos you have on page 9,
Yep.
the bottom right photo where it says likely to dewater, does that mean that in lower water, that stretch of river probably is dry?
That's correct, yes. So these are some of those areas that have, gravel beds and gravel bases that dewater. The other thing we've found is the canary reed grass has established on some of what used to be formerly gravel beds and is quite prolific, especially where there is cattle ranging into the riparian zone. And what seems to be happening is once the roots establish, it creates a bed and is holding. And so you're seeing these large, grass beds down in that riparian zone. And then we're seeing, cattle in that zone. We're seeing it further spread from that cattle impact. So it's something that was actually quite stark when we were doing the monitoring this year, and something that we're very keen to take back to the provincial government as well as the other regulators in the area.
This is probably just me. I mean, I recognize a couple of these locations, but it'd be lovely to have coordinates on them just to...
Definitely.
I like to know what section of the river I'm looking at, right?
Yeah, look, Kevin, these are just a couple of snapshots. We've got a whole lot more detail and geotagged areas. And then what we've done is contrasted them at high flows and low flows so that you can actually look both sides. So certainly I'd be keen to share those with you, and we'll work to have that done as soon as possible.
Yes.
Any other questions? I have one question. You can leave about your staffing in other centers across the north. How many people do you have currently staffed in the Vanderhoof office?
So full-time, we don't have anybody. We are still working on what that looks like and who that is. We have Danielle, who's on maternity leave at the moment. Leanne, that's based in Prince George, but will during the summer be working out of the Vanderhoof office as well. We don't have a Prince George office, so that'll be her home office. And then Quinton, based in Burns Lake. We do have another role vacant that we are staffing for, which would see that increased level of service in Vanderhoof.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Appreciate this very much. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you very much. And look, I will be heading out for the BC Chamber of Commerce AGM in a couple of weeks. So we'll look to take some time to perhaps catch up face to face with a couple of you and take some time to reconnect. Thank you.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. Okay, 5.1 committee reports. I'll start with yourself, Councillor Franco.
A couple things quickly. May 2nd community meeting. Also on May 2nd, and in your boxes you'll see Mass Timber. I had a Mass Timber Advisory Council meeting. This is just a booklet on what they're trying to do with Mass Timber. It's not producing 2x4s in a mass quantity. It's using pieces of wood to make timbers and glue beams and all the 4th and 5th of May, Gerald and the mayor and I went to NCLGA. Interesting that there were, I don't know, 140 delegates there. Nice to see, first time in a while. May 11th, Rio Tinto River update. You just saw most of it right there. May 16th, the Minister of Forest Practice, that was today. Also today, talking with our CFO, there's a release of the Local Government Climate Action Program was released today, and that is the CARIP replacement. So CARIP was the Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program. They've replaced that, and I think Margaret's probably got an idea how much annually we're going to get. It's not an application process. It's more of a record of our assets or scenario, very similar to CARIP, and that's what UBCM was advocating for. So we're pretty pleased to see that come out. And that's it for me.
Nothing to report. Just attended the meeting on Friday for the auditor's report, and just still waiting for the report for the highways from Ellen.
April 26th, I had an NWR Core Committee meeting. On the 27th, a Rio Tinto Fresh update. May 2nd, we had the CDC meeting. May 5th, I had an Indigenous Peoples Day planning meeting. And on May 9th, I had a technical meeting with some of the artists and some of the organizers to figure out what exactly we need. There was the same day, the Electrical Boundaries Commission event at the Friendship Center. And then we had a special meeting that day too. May 10th was the inaugural Northern Solid Waste Working Group meeting. More actually local government people than I expected. And they commented on that it's strange that you see that in the north, but I think there's some passion there. But it was good to see our regional district was represented, as were others, and some other stakeholders to try and put together some heads to see how we can lobby for better services. That's it.
May 2nd, C2C meeting with CICAS. May 4th, I had an attraction and retention meeting. May 5th, I met with the Nechako Valley seniors to discuss some housing. May 9th, there was just a special council meeting I attended. May 12th, I met with a gal named Rebecca Poussette with Cohere Housing Foundation. So I wanted to discuss what they had done and the processes they went through to get some apartments. The 13th, I was at the auditor presentation.
I also attended the C2C with Cycles. It was a good meeting. Met wearing a couple of hats with CNC, Troy Moore and Doug Jameson, and I forget the new addition to CNC PG when we met, talking about ECE, some early childhood education opportunities that looking at some training here in Vanderhoof, possibly doing something with secondary students. obviously there's quite a need, and we're hoping that we have some success there. So that'll be interesting once we get some things fleshed out there. Also attended the auditor meeting 13th, and we have the tourism and housing meetings coming up on the 17th and 18th this week. So that's it.
So right after last meeting, I went down and attended the Kofi conference. It was a good conference. Lot of people again in attendance, same as NCLGA the week after. It was just a really strong desire to get together, share some ideas in person. On the 9th, I met with our local regional district representative. Just kind of went over some common goals, common things that we would like to work on. Shared some ideas of things that could work for us. And kind of had some of that discussion. Went on the 9th to the electoral boundaries and made a presentation there. I focused the presentation not only on the fact that we are a large geographic area, but the lack of transportation. If our MLA comes to the area, it's not easy for people that can't grab the Greyhound bus and get to his office and get home on a regular basis. They're really struggling. The other thing is our lack of broadband in our area. So those two things were the focus that was there. Councilman Trady said he was there and with me, and just that was our basic premise of our presentation of why we thought we needed to keep our riding the way it is. Listen in on the reservoir update. Had regional district meeting last Thursday, the 12th. A large part of the meeting was the waste management meeting and tipping fees. And the waste management committee was doing a lot of work on recycling and has been working with the school and Councillor Young on that. And but tipping fees are definitely coming. And I share that with you because when tipping fees come in, that will mean a whole big difference for our garbage truck and what is going to be required for our garbage truck. And so it was a pretty vibrant discussion, to say the least. But we're the only regional district that I'm aware of. And I think we've been the only regional district the last 14 years that have been on council that does not have tipping fees. Like I say, it was probably an hour and a half, 2 hour part of our day, spent on that. Today I sat in, we had a primary care meeting, and I don't know, it's called NIRD. There is a local primary care thing that is working on men's health. I believe, Gerald, are you on that group?
That would be Councillor Yan and Councillor Lozay.
So anyways, and your focus is on men's health and matter. Yeah, okay. And so anyways, yeah, just had an update of the Tatchik Lake thing, also the foundry out in Burns Lake, and those kind of things. So that on the 13th, it was interesting. When I was at Kofi, I met with the Minister of Forest, Mr. Conroy, encouraged her to come and visit us and talked about kind of our one of the reasons that she should come was our sturgeon hatchery. Not thinking that she was responsible with the organizational chart. I got a call on the 13th and said, yeah, she is responsible for the sturgeon hatchery. So maybe organize it. But hopefully she will be here to come and visit us. And then yesterday I took part in the wild goose chase. I'm not sure. Did I share with you that I was first place? Yeah. Quite a number of guys my age.
Two?
No. Did I send you the picture? Yeah.
No, but if I would have rode my bike, I would have beat you.
There was about 8. So anyways, yeah, that. And then took part in the council meeting with the auditors and CICA's Any questions anybody has of anybody? Yes.
Oh, I'm just wondering with the tipping fees that you were discussing, what kind of timeline are you looking at? So there'll be a lot of notice before those are brought in.
Yes.
No,
it's-
but we'll have to deal with the increased demand for garbage pickup, right?
Well,
Or possible.
possible.
Yeah.
Certainly people won't be, I don't think it's gonna be, I don't know how many people, but I know there's quite a number of people that don't have garbage
Yeah.
service at this point. You know, but if it adds another 50 households, I'm not sure. You know, if
Okay,
that's what, it
Okay.
wouldn't, it wouldn't be
okay,
huge.
good.
But it will, I think it will use our truck to a larger, you know, capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and, but I would think that it will come really soon.
I see,
I
okay.
think the next 5 months,
Oh,
you know, and so, you know, certainly, yeah, they'll have to have some scales.
So following up on Councillor Lozey's comment, and the truck and our pickup to the regional district facility, do we look at that service and say, do we, like 50 may not make that service pay for itself? Can we make it a mandatory garbage service within the bowl? If you're outside in 5-acre lots, maybe not, but inside the bowl, does that come up for discussion maybe later this year? Or?
Well, I think at some point, and I'll turn it over to CEO, I think we have to have that discussion. The thing is I'm not sure why ours is not mandatory. When I talk to people even in rural areas around tariffs, they tell me they have no option. I think there's a desire of this council to have this as a discussion point and to go over the bylaw.
So with the Mayor and Council, I would like to sit down with our Director of Operations and Director of Finance to talk about the implications of both the tipping fees and switching to mandatory garbage service. However, if council does want to hold that discussion on revisiting whether or not to have voluntary or mandatory garbage service, I have one request. If council could do so through a resolution, that will log it in our minutes and also hold a trackable item for staff to report back on. That way we can follow up with agendas committee to decide when an appropriate timeline would be to bring a report back to council.
take that motion.
I'll second it. Yeah, oh, sorry, the only thing I would say is I don't know if it's a rush, if you're 5 months away from tipping fees, it's just to look at, you know, initially, 5 months or 6 months from now, that we bring it back to the table with information.
I think the sooner the better.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think it's prudent, wise. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, now, questions from the public regarding agenda items. We have one in print. Is there a desire just to wait till we get to that item on the agenda and discuss it there? Okay. Should we do that? No, good, all right. We'll do it. Okay, then, there's nothing until we get to 7.21. And there's crime stats, crime. In your hearing from around the community that these are, you know, where it is at, and I guess to me is, you know, are a lot of things going just unreported because of where we are, you know.
Possibility. I think it'd be interesting to have another meeting with them and follow up with that type of question and talk about some other current issues that we are facing that are pretty significant in terms of drug use in the community, et cetera. I think it'd be a good thing to have a conversation. I don't see that being reflected in here. It's kind of hard to reflect in there, but I think some concerns we can share with them.
Yeah, it would be really, really good. Gerald, have you heard anything about when the new commander is coming in?
So when I last talked to Sergeant Hacker, he had indicated that it would be about 1.5 to 2 months from the day that we met. This was back in, I want to say early April. So I haven't received a recent update or a confirmed timeline of when the new commander will be here.
I think as soon as he comes, and if he touches base with either yourself or myself, I think that'd be really good. Many of us don't see the enormous issues that Councillor Young was talking about until it's too late, and then our families fall apart. And the thing is, but I think there's a lot of other things, like I noticed Friday driving past the school, and I was, between 30 and 40, and a guy passes me on the right-hand side and just blows by me, eh? And you want to call the police, and you just go like, are they even going to catch up to him? And then last night I saw a guy doing laps in the park, kind of again about midnight, going, and again you just go like, really, is this, and so the thing is, yeah, I just wonder how many things people are just going like, tell you what, I know we're stretched. Are we dealing? Be good to have a good update and just really hear, okay, yeah, tell you what, be engaged, call in on everything, and let's work together.
So through the mayor to council, just as a reminder, we do have a request from council previously to arrange a meeting between council and the RCMP, just as a general get to know the RCMP members that are serving our community. Staff are still working on setting up that meeting. It may happen before the new detachment commander gets here.
I think we need to have a different meeting prior to that that's more focused on some of these issues. It's not a social meeting, it'd be more of a focus on some of the things we just have brought up recently. I think it'd be good for us to have that meeting. It's not something we'd want to have as a barbecue.
Yeah.
Topic. It's more of a, well, they're pretty stretched, so it might be hard.
Something you want to say? No. Okay, continue on. BC electoral boundary submission. We did your letter. Is there a desire to write a letter as well?
Your presentation is public record.
So, okay.
I would still do a written. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Council Lozey and Council Mutrick.
Absolutely. I was going to say, I think a letter would still have some impact. So I think it's important.
So are there other items other than the three, the large geographical area of our riding? Because when they talked to us, they said population was their primary, thing that they took into consideration on how big a riding should be. And that's just crazy, Yeah.
Well, this is what I had, I would say, although the population is low, accessibility remains a challenge. Okay, we are a large geographical area. Transportation routes are even difficult, right? And weather plays a huge impact in that. So I think all of those things need to be considered when we're talking about boundaries.
Yeah.
If we write a letter, could you do a visual? And the visual would be as you take the Chaco Lakes and boundary and overlay it on Vancouver and show them the size, because they will not still understand size until they see it. Population's one thing, but once you see that boundary take up all of down, 30 ridings down there, you hope it hits home a little bit, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's really powerful to show that visual. The other thing I think needs to be stated, and I don't know how you could wordsmith this, but we are so different and distinct in the north in comparison to the types of concerns they have in lower inland urban centers. So if we lose that representation, that distinctness, I think, is lost. So I think it's really important for the north to have that. So somehow we can wordsmith the statement around. Yeah, you can have multiple reps that are talking about the same thing in the lower mainland versus how different our issues are. I mean, one of them already is geography, transportation. So I don't know, maybe that's an umbrella piece, but I think we have to flesh out a little bit more and talk about those major differences. So, and even the fact with healthcare, because, we go back to every time we talk about healthcare, we talk about the golden hour, for example. You don't have that same type of issue when you go south. If it's full or these things are happening here, 20 minutes over here, you can go to another center. We don't have those options. So I think we have to focus a little bit on explaining that more. People don't realize the expense.
So anyways, do we have a motion for it?
Not yet.
Okay, so can I have a motion to
Move to
write
write a letter.
seconder? Okay. Do you need any more input as to what should be in the letter?
So from what I've heard from council is they like the input that you provided during the presentation with the BC Electoral Commission. If you could provide me your presentation, that would help formulate that. I also got that you wanted a visual of the Chaco Lakes boundary.
Compared to, comparison.
Just lay it over Vancouver.
And then also compare the northern needs compared to city center needs.
Okay.
Nice.
Good.
That works, yeah.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, Riverside Park erosion, and we have the letter from Mr. Celesti. It just says, I would like to put forward another option, and that is we ask Avison Management to quickly plant 300 to 400 stems up and down the bank at a site we agree on as a test, and then monitor the result to then create the next objective. We can expect failures as those closer to the river will be covered with more water during the STMP, and those higher up the banks may have a greater success. But that's the data we need. Timing is critical, and would suggest that this needs to be like the end of next week or quickly into the following. We both collect the willows before they flush and the river flows increase. You may ask AMS, I'm not sure who AMS is, for a price that resembles this and direct award it and have success, but it may also save the DOB funds over time. Okay, so
Through the mayor to council, for this item, we have a report from our director of operations of providing council with 4 different options on the project. He's here to speak further to the report if there's any further questions from council. The recommendation from staff tonight is that council authorize staff to negotiate a direct award contract with Avison Management Services for the Riverside Erosion Mitigation Project, up to a maximum price of $150,000 for the willow planting live staying stabilization methodology, and that we do this over the course of fall 2022, spring 2023.
I want to speak to this. Did you want to speak to it? This is your report.
Yeah, I can speak to it for sure, Mayor, through council. The first option is the willow planting, which the second option would be the wattle fencing, and then the third would be the brush mattress. With the first option being done within the next week or so, that cost would be $8,935 for the trial, spring trial.
Would be how much?
$8,935 for the spring trial.
So is that the suggestion for Mr. Selesky?
That would be that suggestion, correct? Which would be the fourth option.
Okay, Councilor Franco, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I did. I don't mind taking a look at making sure that the willow planting will be okay. In saying that, we've planted a lot of, News has planted a lot of willow shoots. And so the survivability is not 100%. So I don't mind that we look at it, but I think we probably have a good idea already of what the survivability is. So if we put 400, 200 will survive and the other 200 won't. So I don't know I get it. I really do. And we can do that. And that's due diligence on our part, but we're going to end up talking about this again later this year about, well, we only have 50% retention or whatever the number may be. So if it's due diligence, well, let's do our due diligence and I'll move option 4, but we're going to be back at this.
So worst case scenario is 50%. Is that, I didn't see in here what it says. Would that be enough to stabilize, or do we have to get closer to 95% to make sure it's going to be successful? Or do we have the information in terms of the viability? Shouldn't we just base our decision on that prior history? So if you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
I agree with Councilor Franco. You know, it's 50%, but that's good enough.
Or whatever the number is, yes. Yeah.
I don't think we know what that number is. That's why this is a trial phase.
Yeah. It's not 95%.
I'm saying on the other projects that have been done and it's only 50%, are they deemed successful? I mean, that's the piece that I'm wondering.
Yeah.
And if Mr. Selesky is not willing to say, he's saying this is bigger, so I'm not really sure if that's going to be the same as what we did in other areas, it's fine. I don't know what he's thinking. So.
My question is, does anybody else have?
Go ahead and I'll ask afterwards.
Okay, so my question is, these percentage numbers that are thrown out and the thing that Mr. Selesky was talking about, is the success determined by where it is in proportion to where the river comes up? Is that what determines whether it's successful or not? Is it if it gets flooded, it's not successful, and if it isn't flooded, it's relatively successful?
So, Mr. Mayor, there's a couple, to answer that question, there's a couple answers. One being the depth of the planting of the willow, and then 2, also the weather, whether we have a hot or dry summer. And with that being said, then staff or we, Public Works, would have to maintain and water the planting of those willows to see a higher success rate.
Now, we're only talking about that one section kind of there in the park.
Yeah, sure. I'm good with due diligence and trying to get it done, and I'll move option 4. I'm trying to get that out here. I just, to me, I'm still a fan of trying to really armor that bank and not with willow trees, but I know we're hitting roadblocks with DFO and the federal government, so.
So if we do that, well, let's see, first of all, the second, so what you're talking is that we do one thing right now, right quick, for $8,000 or $9,000. Is that what you're talking about?
Correct.
And that's your motion?
Yeah, that's my motion.
Right now.
Yeah, option 4.
Okay, is there a seconder for that?
I'll second. I have a question too, so.
Okay, now I want to go first to Councilor Moutre, and then I'll come to you.
So if we went with option 1, we wouldn't be doing it until the fall, right? Am I correct on that, or?
Option 1 would be within a week.
Option 1 would
Right
be
now.
within a week too, so we do the whole thing.
Option 1 would be the willow planting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think am I reading into Wayne's question? I should have asked him. That he's worried about the STMP having that full slate freshet flooding out some of the.
Correct.
That's what I'm reading.
Yeah.
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 You've got a new release program this year, so, I mean, you should try to figure out where that water level is going to be and then make sure. What? And you're right, Chad, that they do hydraulic a hold down. It's pretty neat to watch, and then it goes down. Hopefully, hopefully we're not spending a lot of time and money watering them. The idea would be is that the willow shoots or the whatever would find water.
Councillor Murphy.
Well, it's more along the lines of what Councillor Wujik was asking. If we were to look at option one, does that impact, or sorry, option four, does that impact the start of option one? Or are we gonna push it further down the road?
If option one, say we do willow planting, we don't do willow planting in the week and a half, we've missed that window because of the willows budding out. And it would go to a fall approach.
Okay, so I guess to me, my question, going back to what you said, Councillor Franco, is there not enough science on willow growth on riverbanks, creek banks, through what news has done that we know pretty well? Just because it's not a success this year doesn't mean it won't be a success next year, or vice versa. It could be very successful this year if we do the $8,000 auction. It's really successful, and we go, okay, we're going gangbusters in 2023, but it could be a different year, and they don't do well. Am I right?
You are in those. Well, first of all, there's not a lot of science. I would say there's lots of anecdotal evidence of where we sit with planting willow shoots into stream banks. We've done it over on Murray Creek. We've done it over on Stony Creek. And we've done it up at the research project up in Martinsfield. So, I'm concerned that I'll follow Mr. Selesky's point is that I'm worried that we go and spend $150,000 on option one, and we're going to lose half of it. And that $75,000 or $150,000, I'd rather see to go back and start working on a different plan, armor or whatever it is. And I know that's an uphill battle, but I just don't want to waste a lot of money. And the $8,000 or $10,000 option, a good shot at going and trying to get it and see what happens.
How many plants would 8 or 10,000 do on that?
That would be 400.
Ooh, that's a lot. Okay. Okay. What about? I just want to ask a question because I was kind of intrigued by option 2. I think it was the states. Has anybody had any wattle fencing? I guess it's called. Has anybody had any history with that?
I will not say that they call it wattle fencing, but there is a fencing project at Mud River that is pretty phenomenal right now.
And is it similar to this?
I didn't see the picture. It's Chelton is doing it. That's Mud River right there.
This one? Oh, Willow.
Yeah.
Which one are you looking at?
This one on page 3 of 7.
35 of 80 on your agenda. That's from Mud River. Chilako River.
Figure 4?
Figure 5. So that's the project we were trying to get. It's a lot of wood debris, but it slows water. It's traps sediment. And I don't know whether they call that wattle fencing.
Oh, no,
That's a brush
Someone above
map.
that. Someone above that.
Yeah.
That's the book brush.
And you like that one better?
I went and saw it this winter with Chelton and Wayne, and I think it's going to improve results. But you've got to let that water come down so we can go out and take a look and see how much sediment settled in those logs, because that's what it's trying to do, is slow it down and stop putting sediment underneath those logs. So,
On that, on that, would you have to have though, that sort of angle like that, like in the park, it's like.
that park is straight up and down. That's gonna be the problem. And personally, I'm worried that you're gonna start ending with your willow shoots over time, just doing this, anyway, so.
They are.
Yeah.
Oh.
But your trial's a good thing, and let this brush mattress
Yeah.
thing. It's the first year Chelton and Wayne have done it with news on the Chilako or Mud River, and they'll see what it's like later this spring.
My question is on this one here, on this figure 5, are those stumps, they're holding those trees in place,
Yeah.
or are they
Wood
stakes
debris.
in there?
No, wood stumps and whatever they shove into the bank, and then it's all wired in and anchored. Yeah, it's amazing. If you want, we should all go take a look at it. But
Pretty labor intensive.
yeah, it is.
It's pretty hard for people to move around in those areas, right?
Start from the bottom and work up, I think, yeah.
But I mean, like after you completed it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be diving off the.
No, you're not messing around.
No. And the Chilaco's got a massive sediment issue.
Mhm.
But I'm thinking over here.
Anybody got any more comments? We have a motion on the table. Can you read the motion?
We were looking at option 4.
Well, there isn't really an option 4 on here.
No, but
Wayne suggested.
yeah, it's whatever, 10,000 or once.
So do we call it the $10,000 option? What, Gerald, help me with it.
So through the mayor to council, just a couple things. First, as a reminder of the objective of this project, the goal isn't to make sure these stakes live at the end of the day. That's a secondary outcome that we're hoping to achieve. The primary purpose and goal of this project from the beginning is to slow down the erosion of the river bank in Riverside Park. Now, option 4, which would be to ask staff to do a $10,000 pilot study of the low planting live stake option, as proposed by Mr. Selesky. That can be done, but we'll delay the project because we're going to want to watch those 300 to 400 stakes and see what happens with them. Do they survive the season? Do they survive the winter? That in of itself is going to slow down this project as a whole. So my advice to council is, if council does want to pursue that option 4 of doing the test pilot, council do the authorization for 10,000, and really ask staff to investigate when reporting back on the success of this pilot program can happen and should happen. Because I think going into the summer and saying that either we've succeeded or not is going to be too soon. We're just establishing the root balls at that point. We really should have success determined over the course of winter in terms of how many of the stakes have survived.
I would like to suggest that we do the $10,000 project, and then I'm really interested in seeing the success of the Chilako River and making a decision based on that, because if it's a more permanent, effective solution, I would rather see something like that. We go that route rather than putting up not such a great solution with the willow stakes. If this is a better solution and it costs a little bit more, but we get a 95% success rate as opposed to a 50%, I think it makes more sense. So I would like to see, immediately put up the stakes that Mr. Selesky has suggested, and then I suggest that we wait and see how this Chilako.
So we have a motion on the floor that we're going to do the $10,000 option here in the next 2 weeks, and that we will have regular reporting back to council as to the viability, I think there should be 2 reporting periods, one in the fall, one in the spring. What we're facing, then a decision will be made next spring. And then at the same time, I don't think it needs to be part of the motion, but I think we should try to do it to LACO. Okay?
We're doing a tour. Is there anywhere with wattle fencing that we could actually go look at too? Do we know of any projects in the north?
I don't know that answer, but I can find out, because I know
Just might be nice to see all options, right?
there was some offense. So I can provide that information.
Okay, do you have clarity on the motion?
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Okay. Yes.
Just one last question. Chad, did you touch base with Ministry of Forest to confirm if we're going to need a permit for works in and about a stream on this project?
Have I? No, I have not, but I can.
So just a note to council, in the event that if we do require this permit, we're talking a 45 delay in delivery on this project.
A 45-day delay?
That's the timeline that the Ministry of Forest typically asks for an application for a permit to work in and about a stream under the Water Sustainability Act.
Is there any way that we could just do a council project that we go out for an afternoon?
There's an easy way to do in-stream works. So, shouldn't be an issue. But if there's a major reconstruction, it's easily 45 days or more. If it's a work that Shelton approves or somebody approves, it's pretty quick.
Especially if it's a pilot project.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing. If we go in asking for a thing, we know we're done this year.
Yeah.
But the thing is, if we go and see Shelton and get the ability to go in there quicker, that way.
Move forward and do this project, the trail project. It's not successful. Is there other costs to remove what was put in, or how do we handle that end of it?
Well, they'll just die. Yeah. And the issue, the result would be, if it doesn't work, you've saved yourself $150,000.
That's
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. 9.3, National Indigenous Peoples Day.
Awesome. No, I just wanted to ask, we've talked a little bit, or I brought up in the past with the National Indigenous Peoples Day to doing a barbecue down there. I would like to see us sponsor the cost of that barbecue. We could maybe take those funds from like the rollover events from last year or something like that, right? That we had a fair amount of funding there. And then on top of that, I would also love to see councillors down there flipping burgers or hot dogs or whatever we decide to do. But I just want to put that request out there to fund that barbecue.
I want to do more than that. I think all of council, I didn't report on that on Saturday. The Hospital Auxiliary did a thing at the co-op. 100%, I think, of the co-op directors were there flipping burgers. And the thing is it showed a passion and commitment, and I think we can all be there. They had a full house and a full contingent, and
what was the date again? June 20.
I don't know, what's the rest of your thoughts?
Well, no, I 100%, and I've asked this over the last number of years, but I think if we do things in the public, I think we should be flashing the colors of the district banner, whether it be a spectacular or a vest or something like that.
Aprons. You know, like the thing is, it doesn't cost a lot to get some, just through the Vanderhoof aprons.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, second,
I'll second it.
You have an idea of cost before we vote on it? Like, is it 100,000 or is it
We try to get
5,000?
a idea of how many people to expect. I've sent some emails to the schools that haven't heard anything back.
more than 2,000.
I wouldn't think so, right? Like that's a big.
That would be huge, I would think. I would think that they already made $1,500. So if you divide it by 5, that tells you that they sold, you know, whatever.
Can I just ask where the location, is it at the skateboard park? Or?
Between the skateboard park and the parking lot for the arena and
Okay.
museum area, that's where the stage is.
Okay, perfect, okay, just wanted to, thank you.
So should we make a maximum, you know, that we say that we will spend up to a certain amount? Sure. What would that be?
Yeah, I didn't bring that with me. Daryl.
So through the mayor to council, if I could actually just turn that over to our CFO to just speak to the budget we have for events and the community advancement budget, and then maybe offer a recommendation on a cap on the funding we provide.
Do have quite a bit of budget and we don't have many events planned as of yet. So if this one was one that council wanted to contribute to, there's money there to do that. We just have to be cautious going on how many other events that we planned with those funds. I don't know how much it would cost to do a barbecue. I can't give an idea on that.
So you probably end up with around 700 students, and then you've got adults, and then whatever street traffic, I mean, in terms of adults are just coming through.
Yeah.
So because the high school students won't be there other than the 7 and 8s. So that's 220, maybe the max 250 each from the other schools. And then about 80 from the school up on the hill. So you'd probably be around 750. And then you've got staffing that would come to. That's if people are all saying we're going. Right, if they have nothing else planned that day. So I mean, what are you cooking, right? If you're cooking burgers or, then you just price out per piece. If you're having drinks, what type of thing you say, maybe a few $1,000s if you've got, that's just the school kids.
But if you doubled the school kids, say it's 750
So
school
you get
kids,
1,500 then.
1,500, and if you said, you know, it's going to be $3 a pop to you know, cost of it.
If you budget $5,000, you're not going to be short.
Oh,
No.
You're good.
Okay, $5,000 in the motion.
okay. Good with the second?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, bylaws, 10.1, arena fees, first, second, and third read of bylaw 12412022.
So through the mayor to council, the recommendation from staff is following the 3 readings on April 25th, the bylaw be adopted as presented.
Move the motion.
Second it.
Question?
Yep.
On all of them, they have the last bullet on the schedule says that nonprofit groups have to apply through grant and aid process. Is that correct? I highlighted, but now it's all blocked out for some reason.
Mayor to council, that was in the policy, I believe, and council resolved to change the word to preferably. In the policy was adopted in the last meeting.
Okay, so adoption, sorry. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, so bylaw 1242, the cultural center fee, and that to be adopted.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, new business, Northern Development Initiative Trust.
Through the Mayor and Council, there's a report before you written by our communications coordinator. The recommendation is to apply to one of NDIT's program for the 2 arena projects that we have this year for the flooring and roofing. Our communications coordinator here is here to speak to the report if there is any further questions on it.
Any questions? There's a recommendation there. Is anybody in a position to make a motion?
Make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks. Zoning amendment application.
So through the Mayor and Council, this report was authored by our Director of Corporate Services. She's here tonight to speak to this report if there's any further questions. The recommendation tonight is that this application should not be approved on the basis of the wording of our zoning bylaw. Then our director can speak more to that if there are any questions.
And that is location to school? Is that the major thing in the zoning bylaw?
It's to another store,
To another store, yeah. Is it 500 meters?
500 meters.
Thank you.
The middle is at the very end there.
Yeah.
Also, it's Highway 16.
And it's Highway 16.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Is this within the 500 meters of the existing?
Yeah.
Yes.
You see the circle there on page, it shows the radius.
Mhm.
Also, like I say, I guess to me it's 2 things. It's within the 500 meters. Second, it's on the Highway 16 corridor that we made a decision on.
We put those things in for a reason, so.
Yeah.
And government stores, one of the things that I don't want to get in the way of private business, but we put those in, and it's almost a provincial standard in communities.
I guess to me, it's a bit too soon to do a U-turn on a discussion that we have long term, and we've had relatively strong support in the community for our decision that we made.
So it says like to not approve, but is that to receive? Or is it a motion
Yeah.
to not approve?
Didn't think we could do a negative
I'll turn that question over to our procedure expert.
Okay, well, my past experience is that it's not, when we said not be approved, that was a positive recommendation, not that it be denied, that was a negative recommendation. But you can also just receive the report, but if you're not approving it, then I'll send them a letter saying with a copy of the resolution.
Okay, I'll move to not approve.
I'll second the motion.
Any more discussion? Yes.
You said you would have a letter going back saying what?
Yeah.
I'll just send them a copy of the resolution and then link to the minutes and the report.
Yeah, I'd like them to understand that we're sticking to the decision we made earlier. Like,
Our zoning
This is
is
why-
500 meters.
And we really haven't had a long period of time. I just think there's a rationale there that they need to understand.
Yeah.
Not just know.
I'll add that with the
Yeah.
copy of the minutes.
That's
the
great.
excerpt from the minutes.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, I'd like to adjourn to go in camera, that council hold an in-camera meeting immediately following the adjournment of May 16th regular council meeting that will be posted to the public pursuant to the community charter to discuss appointments, legal advice, information prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information, Protection of the Privacy Act, FOIPA, negotiations returning to a new municipal service, and FOIPA requests under sections 91A, L, J, K, and 92A, and further that all persons other than mayor and councillor, pertinent staff be excluded from the meeting. Have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And kind of motion to adjourn the council meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Great. You guys want a 5-minute break or want to just get going?
Take 5.
Okay.